It's time for another Dice Tower review with Tim Jennette.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Jennette, the Metal Meeple, and in this video we're taking a look at Vengeance, published by Mighty Boards in 2017. It's for 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 minutes a player. It was designed by Gordon Kaleja and illustrated by Alex Torvinius. And basically, Vengeance works a lot like those action movies where the main character, which is played by you, has been wronged by a gang or by something or whatever. In this case, it's a gang, and they've beat you up and broken you down, and you're trying to seek revenge. But before you do that, you got to get more powerful, right? So you go through a montage phase where you build up your abilities, you get more buff and things like that. You heal your wounds, and you go scouting and take down notes on where you think the bosses are for that gang, and you want to go into the combat phase and take them out. So let me show you pretty much how the game plays. We're not going to go over every rule, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. So here we have the layout for Vengeance. This is going to be in the middle of the table. Each player is also going to receive a player board that has a miniature, a specific montage deck for that character, and each character has a special printed ability down here. Each of these dens, as they call them, basically hideouts for the gang and the boss that lives there, there's 6 of them. They are independent of each other, so they're not connected. Each one's going to receive a face-down boss card. It's going to have one of the bosses from one of the 4 gangs. And there's a whole deck of boss cards that once that den is cleared, a new boss is going to be put there at random, and the board is going to be replaced with another board. There are 12 boards in total. All of them are double-sided. They either have 2, 3, or 4 up here, and you just replace them with the next number. This also indicates how hard the board is and how many bonus points for beating the minions on it they're worth. Over here we have the ability store. This is where you can buy abilities that go on your player board, and you can have up to 4 of those active, but you can stack them, and there's a place where you can rearrange them. You have the timeline of the game here. You have the scoreboard, some achievements and events, and all the dice and components. So before we begin though, I'm going to slim this slightly down so that everything can fit better on the screen. There we go, much better. We pretty much just took it down to 1 den and then all the other stuff, and we put the player board on here. So the game is going to start in the wronging. The wronging is the first thing up here that you're going to put this knife on, and then you can see down at the bottom it also has the player order in which discs and who's first, second, third, fourth, and then the game's going to progress from the wronging to a montage combat, act 2, and then act 3 doing more combat and montage until finally you get to the end, and then you count up who has the most points. During the wronging, you're going to look through this Vengeance deck. You're going to get 9 of these cards, and you're going to draft them except for the last 2, so you're going to draft 7. These will represent the different gangs and the different bosses in each gang. I think there's 2 bosses per gang plus a big boss per gang that has the crown up here. What you're trying to do is get these cards and go after that boss, but you don't know where the boss is because the boss cards are face down. So you're going to have to do some reconnaissance to find them. This is what we would want. When we defeat this boss, we're actually going to get points for however many cards of him we have face up in front of us. So if we have 1 card or 2 cards or 3 cards, that's how many points we're going to get alongside whatever the board amount is, in this case 2 for the starter boards. Once you get so many of these, you're going to take 3 of them, of the ones that you have, and you're going to have to play 3 of them face up in front of you. This is going to determine, like I said, the strategy of what bosses you want to look for, but the reason you want to look for them because they hurt you. In this case, this guy bashed you, this guy beat you, and this guy electrocuted you, right? So you're going to take 2 hurt, 1 stress, and 1 hurt. On your player board, you have 3 different stats. You have mind, skill, and health, and these will suffer cubes worth of damage if you take stress, broken, or hurt points of damage. So hurt is simply going to put red cubes down here. If anything ever says severe damage, you put a black cube, and a black cube just is harder to remove. You can see how many hearts during the montage phase it costs to remove them. We'll go over that later. Whatever number is showing up next to it, that's what your stat is. So in this case, our stat from skill is 3 because we have 3 points of damage on it. The symbols above it, at the end of the game, this is going to be negative points depending on which one's covered. This in the fight phase, you actually get to add the green die, and one of the sides will be determined by that symbol. And then health simply is just the easiest thing to hurt you, because if any 3 of these stats go to 0, you're knocked out. Most things are going to do health worth of damage, or sorry, they're going to hurt you, whereas everything else is pretty much going to do damage based on the vengeance cards. So, once you have decided which cards you have face up in front of you, we'll put those over for a reminder. You're going to move on to the montage phase. And this is one of the two main phases of the game. So during the montage phase, we're going to take our mind worth of dice. So we have 4, since we're not hurt in that for right now, it's just for the example. You get 4 white dice and you roll them. Everyone's going to do the same, and that's going to generate the pool of dice for the montage dice. In player order, you're going to draft these dice back, but you're only going to draft as many as you put in. So we're going to only draft 4. Say we take these 2 and these 2. And we put the rest of them, those will have gotten drafted by other players. Once that happens, you're ready to begin putting your montage cards down. Each player has a deck of montage cards that's specific to their character. There are a few here that you take out, actually, because there's a hardcore rule that says once you play these, some of them get discarded, but for the most part, we're just going to leave them here. There are 3 different types of actions, so we're going to play these 3 right here to show you. You're going to take 1 card, place it above this slot, and this slot, and you can see that each slot gives you bonus points. It gets weaker. The first player is going to reveal their first card, and then they're going to do the right-hand side of it. We'll come back to the left. If they have a red ability up here, this gets done as well. But in this case, we want to do some reconnaissance. So we have 0 reconnaissance. This probably wouldn't have been a good slot to put it in. But either way, we get 0 reconnaissance plus 2 plus any dice that we want to associate with it. So this one. So we have 3 reconnaissance. We're going to get 3 of these tokens. And then later in the ready phase of the combat, you're going to be able to place these out on the boards and then look at the face down bosses to determine who is there. That will give you an idea if you want to go assault that board or not. The second type of ability is buying, second type of montage card is buying abilities. So in this case, we'd have 1 plus 1. We spend a die. We have 3 points to spend. Now on this ability board, you can see there's 2 sections. The top part is ability upgrades, and that's going to allow us to purchase upgrades that we'll put on our player board. So let's say we bought this one right here, and then we bought this brass knuckles as well. The bottom ones are single uses, so once you use them, they are gone, they are discarded. The third ability or type of action you can take is healing. So in this case, we get 2 healing plus any dice, so we have 2. So we would have 4 points of healing, and that will allow us to remove cubes off our board according to this. So to remove a red off of health, it's 1, but a black is actually 3, and you can see the amounts for the other ones. After all that, you're allowed to buy vengeance cards if you want to, simply by spending wild dice. These can also be spent on any of these 3 actions because they're wild. Sometimes when you clear boards, you'll get these wild tokens that you can use in this case as well. And then it'll just simply get you more cards off the top of this deck. Now there are some blitz cards in this deck. Blitzes come in later on after the first wronging, and they will allow you to play them on a board, and it'll up the point value of that board. After that is done, at the end of the montage phase, you're going to count up however many speed you have. I got 3, 4, 5. Each player does this, and that's going to realign the player order. Then you're ready to move on to the combat phase. In the combat phase, we have the first part of the combat phase here is the ready phase, where we get to play the recon tokens and look at the card. You can play more vengeance cards if you want, and you can arrange your abilities. Because you only have so many slots for abilities, you can actually stack them and then reorder them how you want, if you want to put temporary ones on top or whatever. In this case, we're just going to simply do this, and then we're ready to begin. So the first player is going to choose a board to assault, which will be us. We're going to assault this board conveniently, and we take our miniature and we start on the starting location. And then we're going to generate our dice pool for our fight. In this case, just saying that we're perfect health, which would not happen, you're usually always hurt. In this case, we have 4 skill dice. Let's just say we have the second one here, 3 and 1 green. That symbol on the green will dictate the one side here that has double symbols. It's either an X or it's going to be a gun. So in this case, it's going to be a gun. We put this off to the side, and we're going to assault this board. Now, combat works pretty simply. You're going to roll the dice, perform them all, and you're going to do that 3 times, and you either have completed the board or not. So before you roll the dice each time, you can choose if you want to move. This move will provoke damage against you if you're in a zone on the board that contains enemies. So if we were here and we wanted to move here, we would suffer 2 hurt. And that hurt simply goes to our health down here. And remember, any of these stats go to 0, you're knocked out. So we're going to go ahead and move into the first zone though, and we're going to roll our dice. In this case, we have a gun because our green thing represents the gun, and we have some knives. The masks are actually bad for you. That means that at the end of the roll, once you perform all your dice, they're going to attack back. All the enemies will. That can hurt you. If you roll 3 or more masks, you're actually going to discard 1 and re-roll the dice. But let's just say for sake of showing you the example, this is what we rolled, so we have all the symbols here. What we can do them in any order, and remember we have a couple special abilities. We can change guns to sprints and vice versa. So we're going to change this sprint, we're going to leave it alone. The first thing we're going to do is do a 1 knife. We can stab this guy for 1 knife, he goes down. Everybody has 1 hit point except for the green base models, they have 2. We can also spin this double knife, except you can't split the damage up, so 2 knife attacks go to him. He only has 1 hit point, that's okay. We're going to spin this gun to shoot to an adjacent zone. You cannot shoot in the same zone. If you shoot into a zone and it contains a black base model, they're grunts, they will suffer the damage first, so he goes down. And then we can sprint in there. And that was pretty much the end of our turn. If we had rolled any skulls at this point, or masks or whatever, the enemies would attack. Enemies will do 1 hurt damage to you in that zone. The red base models are dictated by the boss. So once you enter this, actually, you're going to flip this over to show everybody what it is. In this case, it's the Gold Gang. The Gold Gang, there's reference cards here, the Tinjikai, they will do 2 hurt when they're activated. So if I was in the zone with a red model, I would suffer 2 hurt instead. The blue base models, their ability is to shoot 1 adjacent zone, so he's not going to shoot us. Before we roll again, we're going to decide if we want to get our free move. We don't want to do that. We want to stay where we're at. We're going to roll the dice. Oh, very bad roll. We have 3 masks, so I have to discard 1 and then roll my 3rd roll. Quick clarification, just to interrupt. Notice this after I reviewed this. When you roll 3 masks and you discard 1 and roll again, it doesn't actually wipe out that combat roll of 1 of your 3 rolls. This actually just repeats that second roll that I failed. We got a gun, we're going to shoot over here, and that's going to actually, we're pretty much out of luck because that's not really going to do us any good, and that was our 3rd roll. So unfortunately, we did not finish this board. Now, let's say for sake of example, if we did go in and we finished the board, you can really just skip through stuff and take damage and go kill the boss. Because as long as you kill the boss, you're going to score points for the boss card. It is worth noting that when the boss is revealed, I'm sorry, I forgot about this, you do add not monsters, but enemies into the same zone as him. So there's more to fight, plus he has 2 hit points. Anyway, once you kill the boss, you're going to get points equal to however many cards you have for that boss. In this case, we have 1, so we'd get 2 points. If you happen to clear the board of minions, you will also score the amount of points at the top right of that board, and that's pretty much it. You can assault a board that does not have the same boss as you. So say you had still a gold card, but it was a different guy, a different boss. You could still score the points for the board for going and assaulting that den. However, if you go to a board that you don't have any of that, you really shouldn't be there because they didn't wrong you, so you can't score points off of it. So you're really not going to go there unless there's some achievements. Some of them will say, you know, go assault a board without looking at the face-down boss first, without having a recon token on it. In that case, you're kind of blindly going in there. But once a boss has been defeated, you also will place them on this wall of glory that you put off on the side of the board. There are a couple of copies of each of these bosses and 1 of each of the main bosses for each faction, and this will allow players to quickly identify which bosses and how many copies have been eliminated from the game. For the most part, that's the game. After each player has assaulted or did a combat phase, then you go back to the montage and you can see the timeline wraps back around till the end. There's some minimal in-game scoring. Essentially, you will get negative points for how far on this track here. You will get points for the achievements. Like I said, these are at the end of the game. This one, the player with the most wild tokens at the end gets 3 victory points and everybody on the tie gets 1. This one, the player with the highest number of scored vengeance cards of the single gang gets 4. So there's some in-game stuff. Usually these are scored as you get them, and that's pretty much the game. Whoever has the most points is the winner. It is worth noting that the game does come with some solo missions if you are into that. There are some rules in the book for 1 player. I have yet to play this. I will just specify that. So that's Vengeance. Let's go to my thoughts. So there you go. That's Vengeance in a nutshell. Before we get on to my actual thoughts, I will say that this game was provided to me from the publisher as a review copy, so keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to say this theme is amazing. I incredibly like this theme. There's plenty of action movies on my top 10 list that include this type of theme, so it's gonna set with me really well, right? There's two parts of it I really like. One is the wronging, just coming up with how your character got beat down and all this stuff. Even though it's not really part of the game, it does say in the book that you can, describe why you have animosity towards that gang and stuff because of how they hurt you. That's really fun. It kind of gets you in character. And then the montage phase works really well because it does play out like a montage where you're building up your character, you're getting abilities, you're scouting for the enemy gang to see where they're at, because you don't really know where their hideout is, so you got to do your research. It's just super cool to me. I really like that. And the one thing I will say about this game is, even though it's dice related, the biggest thing are those abilities that you can purchase, and that's incredibly important. As I found out after playing a few times, it's not that you always want to go in and buy the most expensive abilities. You actually want to have a nice variety of abilities to choose from, because you roll a bunch of swords and you need guns, you need ways to switch that around, but all the really powerful abilities may not work well together. So it's really cool that you need to find these abilities that complement each other. And maybe I think that some of the players' boards, their special printed ability, aren't as good as others, but maybe they make up for it in how their montage deck is designed. I didn't really sit down and do the math on that, but there are a couple of characters that I would rather play than other characters, but maybe that's from a not so many plays standpoint. I have played it a bunch, but at the same time, not as much as maybe the designer has, obviously. So, the one thing I thought was weird about this game is it does come with a sand timer, which blows my mind. I don't know why you would need to have a timed combat round. I mean, the whole point in the book says you add the sand timer to give the mindset that the battle going on is just crazy and it's hectic and things like that. I don't really know that the sand timer is going to portray that, but for handicapping and things like that, maybe that's cool. I don't know. I don't think the combat rounds are that hard to get through or that long, so I don't think it's really necessary. It's a 3-minute timer anyway, and I think most of the time we finish those combats in about that time anyway. So that was just kind of interesting. It's not it's definitely optional, so it's whatever. It's neither here nor there as far as my review is concerned. I just thought I would mention that there is a sand timer in the game. The in-game scoring is a little off to me because I feel like you almost have too much of there's not that much variable at the end of the game with scoring. There's just a few points that will change here and there. It would have been neat to see maybe those achievements and things like that have hidden scoring to them or something. I don't know, something, but it feels like in the last combat round of the game, you kind of already know who's going to win. But then again, they can go and botch their entire combat roll and you come up and make lots of points. So there is that. It's not that I guess it's whatever. I mean, I just like games where there's a lot more hidden victory total towards the end, and you don't really know until you get to that point. This one, you know really what your position is the whole way that you're going through it. The Wall of Glory insert piece that you can put off to the side is really helpful. I think we used it quite a bit in the game, or we used it in every game, obviously, but it just helps because you can look over and glance and see what's missing rather than picking up some discard pile and say, oh, let me find out what I need to go, maybe give away some idea of what you're trying to do. And lastly, I think that the length of this game is very reasonable. It says 30 minutes a player. I think most of the time we finished it in an hour and a half. Not really 2 hours if you take away the explaining of the game to new players and things like that. The players I played it with a few times with them where I didn't have to explain the rules, an hour and a half was pretty reasonable for 3 players, which we played mostly 3 players. You can play it, we did play it 4 players, but the only difference is you lose one of the gangs. It's not a big deal, and I kind of like it 3 players a little better, but either way is fine with me. So this game is incredibly fun. If you're worried about too much luck in the game, just know that the abilities really skirt that. They help. The mitigation is real, but you can also fail at that mitigation if you don't get a right complement of abilities. So if you're looking for a game that has miniatures, the only downfall about them is the miniatures don't really move around. So there's a lot of components there, and I always have like this one little irk about me where if it has miniatures, I like there to be tons of movement. you get to move around, but the miniatures on the board don't. So that's just whatever. In a board game, it's probably fine, but I'm a miniatures player by trade, so maybe that's where it's coming from. Anyway, I recommend it. If it sounds like you might like it, definitely try it. I think you will. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them below. You can reach me at timjennette@gmail.com. Follow me on social media at the handle below. Check out my podcast called Meeple Core. And until next time, keep on rocking and rolling dice.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.